And good morning, good morning. This is your host, Dr. Terry Mason, the show, The Doctor in the House. And it's always heard right here on AM 1690 WVON. And we're going to do the same format as we did last week. We're going to have the phones out so that we can get our guests to have an opportunity to really expound on the things that we talked about last week. Also, I want to thank everyone who did call in last week and the very, very positive comments just overall. And for those who didn't get it in, we'll probably, depending on how the show goes, may have a few minutes toward the end where, again, I will ask you to be very specific about your comments, and that is to comment exactly on what we talked about. I want to finish the conversation because many of you were so inspired by the young man that was here last week, the young men, I'm sorry, that were here last week. So we're going to finish that, and then we're going to add a little bit more because he got an opportunity to start about talking about the difference between evolution and revolution, and we also want to talk about the mindset or the spiritual mindset that, as it were, that is sort of governing a lot of what we see. And unfortunately, many of our youth are wrongly being caught up in the paintbrush of people who are trying to be violent. That is not the majority of our youth. The majority of our youth are just as afraid, don't want to be involved with this, and are innocent folks. This is just a few folks that are carrying this out. But we want to examine where the mindset comes from and where the spiritual part of this come in. So joining me in the studio, and I'm going to let Yosef, he was a young gentleman that was in last week, young brother, very eloquent, one of the sons of Prince Asiel Ben Israel, and actually one of the other sons is also in the studio. And I'm going to let Yosef moderate and carry on, and we're going to ask a few questions. So call somebody, tell them to tune in. We've got young people talking about, and they'll talk about how old they are, but we got young people talking about their perceptions about the issues as well, not just from the standpoint of problems, but solutions and approaches to being able to talk about it. So welcome, Brother Yosef.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Tim Mason. It's always a pleasure and honor to be in your midst. First and foremost, I want to give all honor and praise to the creator of the heavens and the earth and the universe, Yah Yisrael, and all of the ancestors who came before us who made this a possibility. Those who have made transition and those who are currently living. Giving honor to the Ben Ammi HaMashiachs, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, Prince Asiel Ben Israel, the Holy Ambassador, the Honorable Louis Minister Farrakhan, and you, Dr. Terry Mason, who's been instrumental in my growth and my development. And most importantly, the listening audience, because this is what we do it for. But I am so happy today to be accompanied by two distinguished men that are personally helped my maturation through this process of spirituality and acquiring knowledge and intellect. Returning again, I have my brother Daniy'el, but I also have my biological brother, also a son of Prince Asiel, Arel Ben Asiel, who I love so much and who actually was one of my first teachers who guided me and structured me and gave me discipline. So I want to just introduce him and say a couple words real quick. Arel.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Arel Ben Prince Asiel, meaning the son of Prince Asiel. Born and raised in Israel, been in Chicago for the last 10 years. Been throughout the world, though, within that time period. Traveled the country of Africa with Prince Asiel to South Africa, Benin, Ghana, and throughout the country of Israel too. I just got back from Israel about 2 weeks ago. I went over there to visit my family, my brothers and sisters. My younger brother is still over there. He actually participated in the military over there for 3 years. So that's the kind of background that I have. But before I go any further, I want to, like Yosef did, thank those that made this whole reality of being here today possible. And first and foremost to Prince Asiel for having first the courage, and like most men or women do, when they're asked to do something, the first thing they say is, why me? But he didn't stop there. He asked that question and said, why not me? He said, because if it's not me, who would it be to do the things that I know that I'm capable of doing? So I want to thank Prince Asiel first for, again, having the courage to leave here and make a decision of wanting to start and create a better life for first himself, because at the time he had a family. He had a woman that he was married to of 3 years at the time, and they had 2 children. And that didn't stop him from saying, you know what, if I need to be in a position of uncomfort, and if I need to go somewhere where I don't know anybody and where I don't have any knowledge of the culture, but yet he felt something inside of him that said, I know that it's something that I need to do and have to do in order for us to establish ourselves as real human beings on this planet. Because at the time, if you look at 50 plus years ago, when he was making this decision, did he look around him and he seen no way out as a people here in America. So he challenged himself to, if anything is better than what I'm experiencing now, I'm willing to do it and I'm willing to sacrifice myself. So I always have to give thanks to Prince Asiel, because if it wasn't for him, people like me and everybody that's younger than me, as far as my brothers and sisters, this whole reality won't be possible. And then he not just left it there and kept the big surprise to himself. He came back and got brothers like Dr. Terry Mason, and he told Dr. Terry Mason that it wasn't enough that he was a doctor, first again for himself, and then for those that was in such ill positions, that he had to be the doctor for the people. And through these last 5 to 6 years, Dr. Mason has not just been a friend, but yet a brother to Prince Asiel and to the family of Prince Asiel. And I want to thank Dr. Terry Mason for that, because that's no easy thing too. Because when you look at being a part of what we're talking about, it's real work involved in it. And it's a lot of commitment beyond the self-commitment. It's a lot of mental commitment. So it's one thing to do some labor work, but when you get into the mental part of work, that's where what the world calls stress kicks in. And if we know anything about stress, stress is what kills. And that's what kills a lot of black men here in America and throughout the world. So I just wanted to start there and thank you, Yosef, for inviting me this morning, because Dr. Terry Mason have been inviting me for the last couple months, but things just haven't been working out for me to get here. But I couldn't pass this up today, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you all.
The other thing that I want to also recognize is that a few Sundays ago, I also had second-generation business owners. I had the Leak family represented, from Leak Funeral Homes, the Caldwell family from Taylor Wright Cleaners. I had the other family from Kenny's Ribs, and the other family represented from the Imperial Carpeting. And before we go to the next person, you are a descendant now, or of the recipient in the second generation or more of the Soul Vegetarian restaurant, and something that's been in our community for about, 36 years?
35 years this year, yes, sir. Yes, thank you again, Dr. Terry Mason, for considering those things in the community too. Because it's not just you got to have the spiritual, it's not just you got to have the economic, it's not just you got to have the social. But if you don't have what we call this hand that the Creator gave us, and all the fingers is used for a certain part in the hand itself, that it really is not any good and it don't work 100%. So the business that Prince Asiel started, he started it 35 years ago. And how it came about was, I always ask him this story. He said, well, I was talking about living a healthy lifestyle. And me and a couple of brothers and sisters, we was always going to this brother's spot and getting 10 to 20 sandwiches a day. And he said, why don't I create me a space where I can not just feed and service myself, but because I'm on this journey of moving forward and establishing some kind of identity, that he offered a new reality to who he called to be our extended family, meaning the nation at large. And that's how the brand started. So he became a vegan 50 years ago, Prince Asiel. So you see from 50 years to now we saying 35 years in business, that was a period of where he again was talking to himself. But again, he made the choice to say, why not me again? And he stepped out there. And I always tell people that come by the restaurant that 35 years ago, nobody knew what vegan was. Vegan is a fairly new word. 15 years ago, we've been kind of trendy with it. So that's why he started with the name vegetarian, because it was a lot more comfortable for people. And people could understand the word vegetarian a lot easier. And he started there, and his sole purpose was to give back to the community, because he said he realized that as a people, we was being bombarded with all the top illnesses, whether it was cancer, whether it was high blood pressure, whether it was cholesterol problems, and it was most at the peak in the African community. And that's why he chose to do it on the South Side, which always been a dominantly African American group of people. But he didn't just choose the South Side itself. He chose an area where most, at that time, people was kind of established, was the Chatham business area. So that's how Original Soul Vegetarian kind of started. And again, I got to thank Prince Asiel for even having the courage to even do that and step out on the water on that too.
All right, Yosef, you want to go finish the introductions, and by the time we do that, we're getting close to taking our first break. So why don't you go ahead, and then we can get started.
Absolutely. This brother who was also here last week is one of those brothers that's been instrumental in reaching out and blowing the trumpet to our generation. This brother has been instrumental in doing a lot of the groundwork and the behind-the-scenes work and creating the classes and the shows that we do, as far as the editing, the things that you see on YouTube, and the other information that we have disseminated. And he's just a great brother to have on your team because he gets the work done. This is brother Daniy'el. So Daniy'el, you can give us a couple words.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Daniy'el Ammi, and pretty much just I like to give honor and thanks to all those before me, and definitely a special thanks to my brother Yosef. We met back in high school. We just had an instant connection from there. And like I said, it was just second nature throughout the things he was learning and transgressing and going through and was brought up in. I just received those things. But internally, I also always had like a search and a question and a wondering for things, you know, as far as spirituality and connection with God and just life in general. And I always think back now that I'm more conscious of things, that ask and you shall receive. So I always had those internal questions, and lo and behold, my brother that was always next to me was able to fulfill and have those questions, you know, or receive certain answers that I might have had, and not knowing that that's what was happening. It was just an organic thing.
So how old are you?
27.
27. And you?
26.
26. And Arel?
34 now.
34. So I want folks to know these are not, even though they sound like old men, from a wisdom point of view, these are very, very young men, and you don't get a chance to hear this. And because our news and everything else is so saturated with negativity and continuing to try to project an image where all of our youth seem to be in peril, that's the driving force for why we wanted to have this morning. So, Yosef, you want to go ahead and set up? We've got about 4 or 5 minutes before we have to take our first break.
Absolutely. And what you're saying is so critical, Dr. Terry Mason, because we talked before the radio show started about the music of generations and how in your generation the music represented a cause, it represented a movement, it represented a thought that the people had as far as ascertaining freedom. And so that's what our classes, that's what our conversations are for me. Because I can't sing vocally, I want my speech to be a song to the generations that they can hear and be inspired to create an environment that's conducive to life. Because everything that we do and everything that we participate in is contrary to life. So we saying why it seems like this world is so devious, it's because it was created and constructed that way. We just had a class this past Friday that we held that was titled Chemical Castration. And one of the things that we talked about is one of the greatest advents of Western civilization. And the number one mandate and principle that they follow It's in a book called Tragedy and Hope, written by Carl Quigley. So anybody who wants to go out and read it for yourself. But their number one mandate is to kill, destroy, and to develop weapons. See, this is something they're not hiding. Carl Quigley, for those who know, is somebody who was an advisor and a leader and an attaché to presidents like Clinton, Carter, and those before him. So this isn't something that he's just saying from his own personal experience. This is something that's been implemented at the highest levels. So when we talk about fighting white supremacy, it's not just fighting a color. It's fighting a mentality.
Right.
And the mentality is grained in all aspects of this society. So anybody who's familiar with the scriptures, in Ephesians 6 chapter, starting with the 18th verse, it says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities, rulers of the dark world, and spiritual wickedness in high places. So the only way we're going to overcome these things is that we have to be even more unconquerable in our pursuit of love, of justice, of peace, equity, and equality. That has to be our number one mandate. It's life and everything that preserves life, perpetuates life, and produces life. So starting for today, that's what I want to start off is this is the solution. Our songs just don't identify the problems, but also introduces the solution. That's why my father, Prince Asiel, like Arel so eloquently explained and articulated, he created Soul Vegetarian as a solution. Dr. Terry Mason created these avenues and became not just a health practitioner, but one who gives life to the people as a solution. Me and Daniy'el are creating these classes so that we can give an environment that is a solution to our ailments. So now that we can bring these youth, men, women, or elders who want and know innately that they are doing things that are contrary to life, but give them an environment that can produce that. That's why Israel and Demona was established. Like we said last week, it was an external solution to an internal problem. But now we got to look internally to create this external solution. Because that's the number one mandate when they say to kill and destroy. It's not just to kill us physically, but spiritually and mentally. It's to suppress the God gene that was within us. So we have to arise as men of God and women of God so that we can create this new paradigm.
Well, with that being said, I mean, that's a great introduction. We're going to be taking a short commercial break, and when we come back, I want you to really begin to expound, and obviously your brothers join in with the conversation. You're listening to Dr. Terry Mason and the guest on the show today, the doctor in the house. We'll be back with much, much more right after this. Really, to finish what you were talking about, and then to really talk about how this whole mentality that, because when I talk about, there's a paper I got to give you on global white supremacy and what they did by creating this construct called white. They made everybody that wasn't that a problem. And it gave them the right in their own minds to subjugate any of the other people of color all over the planet.
All over the world, that's right.
And the other part of it was that they took control of what was called the seat of knowledge. They arranged for the seat of knowledge and religion to come out of the Greco-Roman culture. And they anchored that and then supported that with the establishment of all their major colleges and universities that created curricula that weren't just taught in those schools, but taught in all the schools. So it denigrated or even ignored the contributions of anybody. Even Alexander the Great, they give him all of this credit when all he did was go and steal and pillage everything from us. And the whole notion of who God is and all those sorts of things, these are the distortions that we're still living with today. And when we talk about the solution, which is why I said there's no simple solution. The solution is everybody's got to be, everybody, not just black people, everybody got to be taught the truth.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's not about, it's really, race is not a construct we created. We can't, so you can't fix what you didn't create. You don't have any control over something you didn't create. Only the creator can deal with that. So what we have to do is begin our own conversation that's based in and on truth, that stands the test of time. And we can't, people always say, where's the proof? Well, we know where the proof is. The proof is in the truth. But the problem is that much of what was written has been purposefully destroyed.
Yes, sir.
We're having a wonderful conversation. We're really getting to the meat of some of it right now with Brother Yosef. And Brother Yosef, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Yes, sir. So this is critical because we're at the juncture where we're right there at the cliff and we're looking over the abyss and we're just inches away of falling over. So what I'm saying is we have to understand what was the first thing that they did when they created this institution called white supremacy. The first thing they did, they always tell us, well, the greatest deception is that the devil didn't exist. They try to teach you that the devil didn't exist. No, no, no. I think the even greater misconception and lie and form of deception that they implant in us is that God doesn't exist in us. See, when you take God out of the equation of your very life and your very nature and your very essence, now you leave yourself renderless to help your own self. So everything that you do is predicated on what somebody else can do for you. And so since the other person that you look for to do something for you is other than yourself, you look for somebody, other outside entity, which has created the eye or the image that white supremacy has created. This is very critical because everything that we do has to go back, as far as our solutions, leading back to the world of white supremacy, whether it's the educational system, whether it's the economic system, whether it's the social system. We always use the same system that was created to destroy us as a way or means of salvation. But how, if you know that the institution, like we just said before the break, was created to kill and destroy, how could that produce life? It's impossible. So as we look to the only thing that is in us that has the ability to do so, it's the God gene, that God seed. Like you just said, break, these institutions were created to suppress and to castrate the God within you. So how do we activate this? First, it's going to take those who know to continually blow this trumpet and blow this horn and to disseminate this truth. Then it's going to take another generation to apply the truth. But how do you apply the truth? You have to go and lean on those who led the foundation, who led the framework, who were the trailblazers in preceding us to connect and show the continuity between the two. We have to lean on the Dr. Terry Masons. We have to lean on the Prince Asiel Ben Asiels. We have to lean on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan because they have done the work. So we can't keep thinking every time another generation comes that you're the first one to have that idea. That's not happening. There's nothing new under the sun. But knowing that those who have preceded us gives us the ability not to be in this revolutionary cycle like we talked about briefly last week, but to evolve. The key essence in our growth and our development is evolution. So starting there is understanding the implement and the application of truth allows you to evolve to something more complex, what makes you that God in you be activated again.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
That's a lot to unpack, and I'd like to hear the perspectives of the brothers in terms of how they see that, and how do you think that becomes an opportunity for a reality to take place, and perhaps it already is.
For me, Doc, this is RL speaking. I look at it as self. You have to, every morning, wake up and say, I want to at least learn one new thing today. Whether it's business related, whether it's health related, whether it's culturally related, or whether it's just something internally in your inside that says, look, I just want to learn something or be a better person today. And if every one of us within our own right do that and not looking for someone else to acknowledge the change or the growth within us, instead of looking at the Creator, like Yosef was saying, to give us the acknowledgement that, look, I see you. That there is where you start to learning who you personally are as a person. Because you start to then realizing and paying attention to your own inner self. And once you could answer to yourself first before you look to answer into your brother, your sister, your mother, if you got children, your children, then that's where you get what most of us call self-confidence. So, and when I look at the word self-confidence, it just says to me that if you can't, within your own right, feel comfortable with your own self, then it's no way nobody else could. And that's where it starts for me. So I always try to narrow things down to self first before we get to bringing in others. The challenge been, though, that we always been trying to please others. And we always been trying to make others understand things that we have not yet been able to internalize ourselves. But if we start with ourselves and saying, who am I as a black man? Who am I as a black woman? Who am I as a man? Who am I as a woman? And then the children, because we looking at this world we live in and we just narrow it down to Chicago, that the children are the ones that's being most affected by all this madness that's happening. And the problem is they never, to me, never had the opportunity to be a child. You see, I was raised in a place where I was able to be a child. I was raised, first I was born in Israel, and then I was raised in Israel. So I actually was able to go outside and really play. I really did play marbles. I really did go to the park and didn't have to be worried about no shootings. I really did grow up in a community where I wasn't worried about any drive-bys. I really did grow up in a community where we did not lock our doors at no time, whether it was 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 10 o'clock in the morning, or vice versa. So if we could mentally start there, like Yosef was saying earlier, to look within ourselves and say, but what am I here for? And we start to get those kind of answers, whether it's talk to elders like yourself that know where we came from, like you were saying about earlier before we was on break, you was talking to your parents, and when you listen to the music of your parents, all these different times that happened within our history represented different things. But if we don't connect them all, it's like a puzzle. If we leave one piece out, the puzzle isn't complete. And if we leave any part of us moving from being in the 30s to the 40s to the 50s all the way we in 2016, if we don't connect all these pieces and do what you're doing now, you have went back to get the younger group. You could have very necessarily stuck in this space where you said, look, I've been doing this radio show for the last 20 plus years. I'm really comfortable doing it because I gained a listening group of people. But it wasn't enough for you. You said, why don't I go stretch my arm and bring those in that's going to carry this thing on for the next 100 years? And that's the way that I should live on. And that's what I see the disconnection been for the last couple years and the last couple generations. That we haven't had enough of people like you to go back and pull us and pull those select few. Because again, another thing we was talking about is we don't need numbers anymore. That's been the misconception that we needed numbers. We needed 2,000 people and able to be effective. We needed 3,000 people. Now we saying if we can get a Yosef, if we can get a Daniy'el, if we can keep brothers like Dr. Mason and Prince Asiel, then that's where we'll start. So those just my thoughts on how we should start to looking at the next phase of getting the young generation in. That they first have to ask themselves, not knowing who they are, but they still have to ask themselves, because first the Creator said, if you stretch your arm out, I'll grab it. But if you don't move your arm, He don't even know you alive. He don't even know you want it. He don't even know that you need the help. But at least if you stretch your arm out, He can at least grab it, pull you up off the cliff, pull you up out the water, and do whatever else is needed to put you on that path.
And for me, real quick, just piggybacking off of that, now that you have that select few, again, like you said, we just have to deal and move from there. You know, those who know, those who consider themselves the leaders, the he-goats, you know, us as young leaders, we just got to make sure we can come together and formulate and put our ideas together, our information together. And I think that's a problem as well, because there's a lot of young people out there that's disseminating information out, connecting with people, but I feel like we try to debate, and we have to stop the debating and find a way to put this information together. Because this date may not connect with this date, but we're still saying the same thing. So we have to find a way to come together, get this information together amongst those few, and then continue to outsperse, go out here, go out there, and just connect with the youth, connect with the elders, because they need it just as badly.
Absolutely, brother. And I think that was the mandate why we created the class, is because we wanted to create an environment with men and women that could have spiritual and intellectual equity. Everybody have a foundation and a base and understanding of what's really going on and what needs to happen, so as we continue to grow and we continue to prosper. And we had a conversation last week with a brother that's around our age that we grew up with, and he was saying that he's anti-religion and that he's spiritual. So I proceeded to ask the brother, okay, you spiritual, what does that mean? And he said, well, I believe in God. I said, okay, but what does spiritual mean? You believe in God, but what differentiates spirituality from religion? He said, but I don't abide by no rules or guidelines, but I believe in God. I said, well, brother, see, this is the misconception that we have. I was talking about suppressing that God within you, because they make you think spirituality is a legitimate way out of not applying yourself or keeping yourself accountable for your own actions. Spirituality is a science. Spirituality is when you apply certain laws and formulas to produce a certain outcome. So a lot of times we think, well, I'm a good person. Why is this happening to me? It's because there's certain things you are not doing with your own life to create a certain outcome. And this is what we have to get back to. That's why Minister Farrakhan always teaches Islam is your nature. Religion is not what the Western world has created it to be. A lot of these words that they have the power to define and control and convey to us, we've just accepted. Religion is just a way of life in its most purest essence. It's a form of government. So when we say we Hebrew Israelites, we're not saying it from a religious standpoint that we're used to words or the world's using religion. We're saying it from a nationalistic standpoint. Israelite connects you to a land, takes you to a government, it can takes you to a sovereign. Hebrew is just a form of government. It's the way we govern ourselves, but people take it as religion because God is at the forefront. Not just an external God, but the internal God. But that makes you responsible. So when you really look at it, democracy is a religion. Capitalism is a religion. It's rules and guidelines the way someone governs their nation. So I'm saying we have to, as we create this new paradigm, we have to reform and restructure by using the power to find our own reality and not use the mandates that have been given us, which were under the number one rule is to kill and destroy and to keep this divisiveness amongst each other. So number one thing that the Lord God hates is discord amongst the brothers and the sisters. So we're saying unity. That's why spiritual and intellectual equity is at the number one forefront of our classes. So nobody feels lesser than the other. We all are in this together. Whether I'm the speaker or you're the sweeper, we still have the same job. It's to ascertain true freedom, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come. So I think that's like the format and the foundation on which I want to go forward with Dr. Terry.
Well, that's very powerful, and I just wanted to say that I grew up in a time where we didn't necessarily have to lock doors either. It's just that it's changed, and those of us who grew up in the South, many of them never locked doors, and everybody was everybody's children. Everybody could eat anywhere. Just quickly, I had my grandson down with my family in Arkansas, in a small little town where actually everybody in that little town is related. So he was going out with one of his cousins, and everywhere he went, they knew him, they knew of him, and they knew who he's with. And so he called me back and he said, Granddad, everywhere I go, he said, you can never do anything wrong down here because everybody knows you.
Everybody knows
Everybody, yeah, you so-and-so's boy. You so-and-so's boy. What you doing over there?
Let me get your daddy on the line.
No, they didn't have to get your daddy on the line. They put you on the line. And then they let them know. And that was the way we were raised in Inglewood, believe it or not. So, Yosef, when you say the things that you're talking about in terms of the community and what have you, that was so true. And that has been encroached upon, part of it by government, part of it now saying, and so no one would want to damage a child. But nowadays, children feel as though if they are being unduly disciplined, they can call in the law on their own parents.
That's right.
Which is a really kind of crazy thing from one point of view. But to go back to it, the one thing that we did have, and we wanted to finish comment on, is the role that having that God presence, that God fearing, that whether you want to call it religion, whatever it was, but it was the moral and ethical guidepost for your life.
And that's what the fathers represented in most cases. The mothers as well, but definitely the fathers. And that's why it's such an attack on our men. And that's why, even with the class we covered Friday of chemical castration, the feminization of the men is so instrumental in their development and our tragedy on this planet. When you take the man, you take the stronghold, you take the presence of God out the midst of the house and out the midst of the family. Now, everybody is on their own, basically. So everybody leans to their own understanding. So the woman feels that she's a man, now she's out of her natural cycle because she has to take on both roles. The children end up becoming parents. They have to become the mothers and have to watch other children and so forth and so on. Everything is out of its natural cycle. So now nobody has the ability to perpetuate God in the midst of the household because nobody knows their role and their purpose anymore. And that's when we come as a people. We've lost our purpose and therefore haven't been able to fulfill our destiny. So what we're saying is the solution is you have to know first the God within inside yourself and be around like minds. Like my brother said earlier, it doesn't have to be mass numbers, but it has to be a nice number of men and women who are like-minded. May not do the same thing as you, but they have the same aspirations and the same goals and ultimately the same destiny. We all have different functions that we have to fulfill. Just like the body, you have the skeletal system, you have the muscular system, cardiovascular system, but it all has one goal and one aim. Is the preservation of life. It protects and houses your soul, which gives life to you. So everything that we do has to be the same. We all have to have our functions, but yet and still it has to benefit the whole. So I'm saying we have to create institutions and infrastructure, like we talked about last week, to create an environment that's conducive to that reality. That is so critical, Dr. Terry Mason.
So how do we do that?
First and
From your mind.
Well, first and foremost, first thing we have to do, I have to keep pressing upon this point, is we have to go to those who've done the work already. We have to lean on Prince Arel Ben Asiel, who've created and established a new government in Israel, and also all the men and women who were part of that. We have to lean on Dr. Terry Mason, who took over the world of health in Chicago and redefined what real health is. We have to lean on the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who had the lineage that was given to him by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and continue to create institutions. We have to lean on any man or woman who has the ability to not just know truth, but to apply it in their daily lives in all aspects. So create institutions like Original Soul Vegetarian is so instrumental because it not just feeds people. It's a lot of vegan restaurants, but it's a culture. It's an environment that's protective of those minds who want to perpetuate a certain mentality. We have to create like this different posts amongst the city that we can bring the children off the streets and they can play chess or play ball, but also can be indoctrinated in the sense that they understand their true selves, that they can be able to learn and understand holistic measures of medicine. Because we know that the food has been the number one detriment in our growth and our development, and the suppression of that God gene and the castration of who we are as men and women. The genetically modified foods, the herbicides, the pesticides, which are created to castrate and to demasculate the men of this planet, and also to change the women. So we have to learn how to create agriculture out of these food deserts that we got all these empty lots. We can create nice greenhouses that we can start feeding in the communities again, and that we can control our own food. We also have to create infrastructure that builds alternative clean energy. These are things that we can do now with the understanding that we have that does not take a lot of money, but just take the willingness of the men and women to participate. We already have the power to control our own destiny. We just have to take it in our own hands.
And I think, Doc, that we really doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because we here today, and because Original Soul Vegetarian still stands. The Elite Funeral Family Home is still here. So we really doing it. It's just for us to understand that it doesn't have to stop there, but it has to keep growing from there. That just like the Leak family, they dared to start the grandfather. He challenged himself. Nobody challenged him. He challenged himself to do what he did. Open a business and then maintain it, pass it down to his son. to where they 50 plus years, did we have to look within ourselves and say, that's me. That's not just them because they're on 79th Street and because we know that they got buildings and lots. That's me too on 64th Street in Ashland, if that's what I want to be. That's me on 75th Street if that's who I want to be. Because one of the things that we do, and we tell all of our employees down there at Original Soul Vegetarian, is that you guys not here just for a job. If you're here just for a job, we don't need you. You here for a transformation and to be able to take this new reality of what we call life and keep helping it grow to your family, your friends, and throughout the community. But if you're here just for a job, we don't need you.
Well, you know that I have a second conversation coming up with everybody because it's the next conversation is what do we need to do to take things to the next level? We've had some growth, but I want to open the lines up for a few moments here, just so that I want to just limit comments to exactly what we've been talking about. So we're going to open the lines. We won't have very much time. We're only going to have maybe less than 4 minutes. But so I just want if you want to have a quick comment about what you've heard, lines are now open, 591-1690, 591-1690. You can call. All our lines are open. And if you have a quick comment about what you just heard, I don't want to hear anything about anything else today because I'm trying to keep us focused. I'm redirecting the energy of the show because right now our time, it is critical. Where we are now is in a critical time. And I think when you hear Yosef talk about it, you can hear the energy, but that energy is fed from the critical nature of his analysis of what he's seeing.
Yes, sir.
That's what I understand. Would that be fair to say?
No, that's absolutely fair. And because I see the reality that we face every day. Being born in Chicago, but being from Israel gave me a whole nother perspective because I see the blessings, but I also see the curses that have been put upon us. So I can see the difference between the two. So I understand where we are, but where we need to go, and where we've been going through the lineage of our parents, like Prince Asiel, Ben Israel, Ben Ammi, and all those great men and women. But I just want to give Daniy'el a quick word before we open the call. I know you wanted to say something, Daniy'el?
Basically, it has to create a form of consistency off of everything that we're doing, the things that we're talking about, putting the classes together, coming out here and doing the radio show. And even what you said earlier, Arel, you should have to put it in our mind to where I want to learn something or do something every day. So every day we got to try to create that schedule or create that time to do something productive going forward with what we're talking about today.
Yes, thank you for calling. Yes, we've been in the community for the last 35 years, and we've been at that location. We had opportunities to go north or go west, but because we knew that we needed it, I won't just say more, but we needed it just as much as anybody else, that we kept our location right there on the south side of Chicago. And there you can come and we have a salad bar, we do breakfast, we do lunch, we have what we call express hot bar too. So you in for a treat when you come there.
Just want to remind everybody that this coming Thursday at 400 West 95th Street at Trinity United Church of Christ, I'm going to be doing a class at our regular Restart class, which is at 6:30 at Trinity United Church of Christ, 400 West 95th Street. This week's class is going to be talking about the importance of gut health, the importance of your gut, because what you don't realize is all of your immune function, most of it is concentrated in your gut. And this is another reason why what we eat is so important. So come on out. It's free. It's this coming Thursday at 6:30, Trinity United Church of Christ, 400 West 95th Street. I'll look to see you all there because we're going to really have a very good class about this. You said we got about a minute left.
I just want to thank everybody who called in, all the listeners out there who didn't call in as well. Thank you, Dr. Terry Mason, my brothers Daniy'el and Arel, and also continually thank those who came before us again. Prince Asiel, my personal father, honor those who preceded us and continue to do the work for our people. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Ben Ammi, all the people who represent truth and love on this planet. I just want to thank you all.
Well, thank you all for listening. And again, I hope to see all of you. There's no charge for the class at Trinity United Church of Christ. Where's your next class?
2 weeks, not this upcoming June 3rd, but the next week after that, the Friday. That would be the next class. So please come out at 205 East 75th Street, 205 East 75th Street. It starts at 7:30. Thank you.
And until next week at the same time station, may God continue to bless each and every one of you, continue to help the strength. The next voice you're going to hear is the lovely Pam Morris, who's coming to make a joyful noise over the radio station with a song that she wants you to put your name on. Be blessed.